Hi, this is Marc Elias, founder of Democracy Docket. I do a lot of television appearances about topics related to democracy, everything from voting rights and elections to what Donald Trump is doing in court, who's winning and who's losing. But it is rare that I feel as strongly and as passionately that there is a topic that is simply being undercovered and underappreciated today. And so I had an opportunity to talk to Nicolle Wallace about this. She was fabulous. She actually read extensively from a piece I wrote for premium members at Democracy Docket. If you didn't get that piece, or if you want to subscribe to premium content at Democracy Docket, please click on the link above or in the show notes below. And what this was about is how we have allowed Donald Trump to misuse the Department of Justice and the criminal prosecution and indictment system to go after his political enemies. And he has shifted the Overton window of what is acceptable. You have Pam Bondi doing, political interviews of sorts, effectively from the White House lawn. You have Donald Trump going to the Department of Justice and targeting his political enemies. I know about that firsthand. And now you see the misuse of the criminal justice system. His Department of Justice has indicted a Democratic member of Congress in New Jersey. We saw federal officials go into a congressional office in Washington, in New York City, and handcuff a staffer. We've seen the opening of investigations into the New York Attorney General. We saw the indictment of a liberal judge in Wisconsin. But the straw that broke the camel's back for me, as I talk to Nicolle about, is the statements that were made about Gavin Newsom, the Democratic governor from California, where essentially Donald Trump says, yeah, he ought to be arrested because he ran for election one and I don't like his policies. And then to make matters worse, as you'll see in these clips, the Speaker of the House added an even more despicable take. So go ahead and watch these clips, and then I'll come back and add a little bit more context. I think that Donald Trump has successfully moved the Overton window in a way that is as dangerous for the future of democracy in this country as anything else. I'm here today not to tell people everything's going to be okay, but to sound a really loud alarm, which is that Donald Trump has turned the Department of Justice into his personal legal task force to go after his political opponents. Think about the norms that have already been violated. Pam Bondi, an election denier, put in charge of the Department of Justice. She views herself as part of Team Trump. She hangs out in the Oval Office. She does live shots from the White House, completely unprecedented. Donald Trump goes to the Department of Justice to give speeches in which he attacks lawyers like me and others by name. We have seen the Department of Justice go after his political opponents directly. A Democratic member of Congress in New Jersey, he's reportedly investigating the Democratic Attorney General of New York. I mentioned in that piece that he arrested a prominent labor leader. He's also indicted a liberal judge in Wisconsin. Also remember that his administration sent federal officials into a Democratic congressman's office in New York and put a staffer in handcuffs. This is the playbook by which authoritarians are able to subdue their opposition by investigating them, indicting them, and even if they get acquitted, the damage is done. Why are people staying silent? I think they are afraid. I think that they have normalized this. But, Nicolle, it's got to end. People need to take a stand and say we are not going to allow the misuse of the criminal justice system, the indictment process by Donald Trump in this way.
I want to show you how it's infected the most senior leaders of the Republican Party. This is Mike Johnson on what should happen to Gavin Newsom.
I'm not going to give you legal analysis on whether Gavin Newsom should be arrested, but he ought to be tarred and feathered, I'll say that. I mean, look, he's standing in the way of the administration.
That's the Speaker of the House, Republican Congressman Mike Johnson.
Yeah, and I want people to recognize he is second in line to the president of the United States. This is not some backbench Republican saying something irresponsible. This is the person after the vice president who would become president if there was a vacancy. Okay, he is also a professed Christian. He is also a professed constitutional law expert. And here he is saying, number one, He will not say that the idea of arresting Gavin Newsom because he is a Democratic politician in in California, he won't say that that is wrong. He says, I won't opine on that. But then he goes on to say something even worse, which is that Gavin Newsom, the democratically elected governor of California, should be tarred and feathered, which means he should be stripped naked. He should have hot tar burn his body and then be rolled or have feathers thrown at him. Okay, that is what the number two in line to the presidency, a constitutional law expert, a Christian, is saying should happen to the Democratic governor. And is there any outrage? Is there any place in the Republican Party that is saying this is completely out of bounds? Are there any Republicans with the decency to stand up and say, no, we don't do that to Democratic elected officials? No, Mr. President, we don't prosecute our political opponents. No, Speaker Johnson, we don't want violence against democratically elected politicians in this country. No, they all act like they don't know. They all act like they haven't heard. They all act like they misunderstood or that we're overreacting. I'm telling you, we're not overreacting. This is only 5 months in. This is going to get much, much worse.
I have to sneak in a break, but I want to turn to the escalating language around oppositional speech and dissent and peaceful protests. Mark isn't going anywhere. We'll both be right back. Let me read you this from the Brennan Center's analysis, unpacking Trump's order authorizing domestic deployment of the U.S. military. Quote, nothing in the memo limits deployment of the military to the city where protesters are now clashing with ICE officers. Indeed, the memo doesn't even mention L.A. It purports to authorize deployment to protect ICE and other federal personnel performing federal functions, quote, at locations where protests against these functions are occurring or are likely to occur based on current threat assessments and planned operations. In other words, federalized guard forces could be sent anywhere in the country where protests against ICE are deemed likely. There is no requirement that the protest involve violence, vandalism, or any disruptive or illegal activity, raising First Amendment concerns along with concerns about the use of the military. Indeed, the deployment may occur before any protest has even happened. This is truly unprecedented. Preemptive nationwide deployment of the military is the very opposite of using the military as a last resort, and it should raise a bright red flag for anyone concerned with the future of American democracy. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, look, what is happening in Los Angeles is well within the capability of the police forces in California to handle. I mean, we have seen the videos. There are sporadic instances of clashes, but nothing on the scale of what we would not expect a major police department with some federal backup to be able to handle. And the fact that Donald Trump federalized the National Guard in California was done as a provocative act to be provocative. The fact that he then deployed Marines was an effort to show that he is an authoritarian. It is not a last resort. It is a first resort for Donald Trump because he wants to be associated with other authoritarians. So are we going to see this in other places in the country? Absolutely, we're going to see this in other places in the country. Are we going to see it expanded to include more Marines? Absolutely, we're going to see it expanded to include more Marines because Donald Trump wants to be seen in a certain light. That's why he's doing a parade in which he's going to rip up the streets of Washington, D.C., so that on his birthday he can roll Abrams tanks into our nation's capital. It's all symbolic for him. It is all about showing that he is like Vladimir Putin, his friend and idol, like Kim Jong-un in North Korea, who is pen pal. He wants to be seen in that light. All right, so that was me talking to Nicolle Wallace. As I warned you, I got very emotional, angry about what is happening in our country. Donald Trump is an authoritarian, and he is setting up a permission structure for him to do an enormous amount of damage to democracy by being able to misuse not just the police, not just federal officials, and not even just the military, but to use the prosecution system in this country to go after and potentially eventually imprison his political opponents. And we are only 5 months into this. Like, we're not at the end of this road. We're at the beginning of this road. And he is doing this and he's being enabled. And frankly, with the exception of people like Nicolle Wallace, who is an absolute treasure and critical person in the media, a lot of the legacy media is just not paying attention to this. And a lot of people are scared to stand up and speak out. And I know there's a lot of other things going on in the world, but this is really, really important. So I hope, like I said, you pay attention to this issue. I also hope you pay attention to what Democracy Docket is putting out. It is covering a lot of issues right now critical to democracy. So first and foremost, click the subscribe button on this video so that you'll make sure you get the video content that Democracy Docket puts out. But also, if you want access to our premium content or even our free content, click on the link above or in the description below. The premium content is just $10 a month. The free content includes our daily and weekly flagship newsletters. And I hope you subscribe to the one that fits your needs. Thanks.